This country, for hundreds of years, in its DNA, has racial issues towards other ethnic people.
在美国，身为亚裔是否就意味着被固有的刻板印象所左右，甚至因为偏颇的数据而受害呢？回顾了美国的历史仇视亚裔的由来，亚裔或华裔被丑化，导致了对华裔的恐惧跟仇恨。历史重演新冠肺炎大流行期间，华裔被曲解和侮辱为传播病毒者，种种因素呢，也让这个美国的亚裔跟华裔因为自身的种族身份而感到不安全。而在各种领域的调查数据当中，亚裔的数据信息相当的少，甚至有所缺失。这种现象不利于改变对于亚裔跟华裔的歧视跟偏见，在法律上也不会受到尊重跟保障。只有更多的亚裔的声音被听见、被收集，才会影响到法律或者是政策的制定。今晚节目当中为大家邀请到的是王明武律师，一位来自美国出身的华裔律师，来谈谈他的成长过程和所接触到的歧视亚裔的案件。看完今天的节目，相信你会更清楚如何保护自己、保障自己的权益。一块来欢迎王明武律师。各位仇恨边缘的观众朋友，大家晚安。在今天节目当中，我们特别为大家邀请到的是知名的律师王明武王律师来到我们节目当中，一块来欢迎他。Hi, Mr. Wong. How are you today?
I'm doing just fine.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. It's our pleasure to have you here with us. So I think before we jump into our today's topic, could you please tell us a little bit about your background? What made you become a lawyer?
Well, thank you for having me here today. I think it's very honorable for me to be here today. So I grew up in the 60s and the 50s. Actually, I was growing up in San Francisco, and it was not as populated as it is now. And in the 60s, you know, we had the civil rights movements.
Yes.
And there was a lot of issues in the Chinese community back then. So that prompted me to go to law school, because when I graduated from Cal, I didn't know what to do, you know? So I went to law school, and that really changed my life. Going to law school, it really shaped my political views, my views in society, in terms of how the Chinese has grown and prospered and also faced difficulties and challenges in America. Now, my background is that I've been here, even my grandparents were born here, okay? So I'm like third or fourth generation. And so I had that privilege of living in Chinatown, in the Chinatown area, but you know, back then in the 60s and 70s, we still had issues, a lot of issues with Asian hate when in regards to the problems that we faced.
So do you think the Asian community, especially the Asian Chinese immigrant community, has changed over the years?
Unlike other areas in the United States, I've traveled a lot in the United States, and I've observed a lot of different Asian communities in the U.S. You don't hear in the Bay Area, if there's racism, it's very subtle and very, you know, there's a lot of silent hate, but you don't see any overt hate here. But you'll see that in other pockets of urban and suburban and rural areas in the U.S. You'll see that even up to today. I've experienced that in the 70s. I practiced law in Idaho, the state of Idaho. And just to let you know, okay, when I studied the history of Idaho, I found out that I'm the first Chinese American being admitted to the State Bar of Idaho. Wow. So I'm the first lawyer of Chinese, Cantonese descent to be admitted to the state of Idaho. That was in 1976. And I started to look at the history of Idaho with respect to how it impacts Asians. And I found out that it had an ugly history towards Asians. Back in the 1800s, when we had a lot of Asians coming, traveling all over the United States, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, especially, you know, California. And there was a tremendous amount of Asian hate. Back then, it was very brutal, very brutal. You don't see it in in American history books. They hide that truth, but it's there. You see a lot of Asians being treated unfairly, brutalized, going to prison over very little petty crimes. But you see that all over the country, even today, and they don't talk about it. It's swept underneath the carpet. What we need is a lot more education to let the people know what Americans know, that Asians did face a lot of had a brutal history in America in the past.
I see. So I'm more curious, and I believe our viewers would be interested to know, have you had ever experience of any Asian hate or any discrimination experience personally in the school, when you were in the school or in work?
Well, you face discrimination in a very subtle way every day of your life. And just recently, I've had that experience where we had a trial, and this is only a couple weeks ago. We had a trial, and before we did opening arguments, the lawyer came back and told me that based on my client, who couldn't speak a word of English, and we were going to trial, and he basically said that he's disseminated my case, tore it down. I have no real witnesses that I could bring to trial. So I had nothing to lose but go try the case. We did opening arguments, and then that same morning we settled the case. Earlier, I've had that case for 2 years, and during those 2 years working with this other law firm, the way they worked up the case, they go to mediation, for example, which is something you try to resolve your differences before you go to trial. And in mediation, they didn't offer anything in terms of what was already on the table. They offered just a fraction of what your case is really worth. By the time we went to trial and after we settled it, you achieved my results. I achieved 6 times what they offered in mediation. That's because they didn't take you seriously for 2 years. And when you finally go to trial and you present your case, that's when they know that you're serious. And so, but there's a lot of subtle discrimination because, I don't want to say it, but a lot of the non-Chinese attorneys, they subconsciously believe or consciously believe that they're superior towards the Asian attorneys, especially smaller firms like mine. We have a small firm. But I've been practicing in California for now 45 years.
I believe you still have a lot of information, the story or experience will share with us. But however, we need to take a break from here, and then we continue our topic for the next segment. Okay? 非常谢谢这个王明武律师的经验分享。那我们先稍微休息一下，之后待会还有更多更精彩的话题带给您。当我们进入后疫情时，与几年前相比，看到的人身攻击可能会减少，但沉默的仇恨可能变多了，还是它早就是我们社区当中存在另外一个问题呢？那它可以得到什么样的法律保护呢？专家又会有哪些建议呢？继续欢迎到我们今天特别来宾王明武王律师。Hello, Mr. Wong. Thank you again. Appreciate your time to speak with us. Yeah, and the next question will be, in general, as a legal expert, what's your take on the Stop Asian Hate movement?
Stop Asian Hate movement was never in the past really a real movement. Today, it just started today after we had the post-COVID, and during the COVID because of the Trump era of presidency. That created a lot of problems for Asians in terms of Asian violence. So that's why the movement started. And I think it's great to have that movement continue where it is. It has great impact. But, it's not going to stop Asian hate. You're always going to have that.
Always, yes.
This country, for hundreds of years, in its DNA, has racial issues towards other ethnic people. It's never going to go away.
During the post-pandemic, we know the Asian hate tends to become like a silent hate. So what do you think about the silent hate, this issue?
Well, when you have silent hate, okay, there's nothing you can do about that, okay? It's always going to be there. And hopefully, that if we continue to educate and and make the populations in the United States more aware of the problems, then the silent hate will subside. But it's always going to be there, especially outside of California, outside the Bay Area, where there's less diversity. Every place you go where Asians, especially immigrant Asians, who are trying to move ahead in America, do well, they tend to go into new communities and try to start their businesses or do well. And when the white majority sees that in these different communities, they resent that. So but there's a lot of silent hate over it. They don't talk about it, but it's there. Not so much in the Bay Area, but you got to go around the country, and you travel the country, you can see it. Because I've been around the country and I've seen it. I've lived around different places in the country.
So nothing we can do about silent hate except we have education. But however, what if our viewers has like a silent hate situation? What the legal potential they can take or they can do?
Well, you know, unless it's violent hate, if you feel that someone's discriminating against you, silent hate, you know, unless it's violence, there's nothing you can do to report that to the police authorities, for example, or, you know, assert some type of charge with a crime against silent hate. If there's silent hate and you feel it, and it's your neighbor, for example, you could sue your neighbor for defamation or for taking action to that you might feel that contempt and discrimination against you. You could sue your neighbor. You better hope that he's the deep pocket or has a insurance that may or may not cover him. But individually, that's the only way you could stop the silent hate or discourage people from hating you silently. But otherwise, I don't see any hope to really suppress silent hate. It's always going to be there.
But if we're gonna do some action, but we need to collect like evidence, how should we do that?
Well, normally when you have evidence, it's because there's domestic. It's not silent hate.
Yes.
It's overt hate.
I see.
Violence is involved. So the evidence is that if you're injured and someone attacks you and you call 911 or you have the police authorities here and they have to investigate the case, that's not silent hate. That's actually overt hate. Silent hate is when you're being discriminated against, you know that they hate you, but they don't overtly, there's nothing you can do about that by calling up the authorities to stop that silent hate.
So do you have any case related to silent hate or like during pandemic, you have any case related like Asian hate you can share with us?
Right now, I don't have, my office doesn't represent anyone post-pandemic on any type of hate crimes.
Okay.
Now, if you have hate crimes, whether it's silent hate or overt hate, that's and it becomes a crime, that's up to the government, that's up to the district attorney's office or for law enforcement to deal with. Privately, we can't, we can't do anything to stop, overt or just get justice from because of silent or overt hate. The criminal justice system takes care of that if there's a crime involved. If there's no crime involved, then if there's silent hate, you might use the civil system. But you're going to have to, that's very difficult to prove silent hate in the civil system. And if you do, you still need to show injury and damages, and you need to show that the other side of the deep pocket has money to compensate you. That's not easy to do. Most people who have silent hate, they don't have the financial means to pay you for the injury they caused to you.
Wow. So yeah, I believe our audience got a lot of information, but we need to stop here and we need to take a break again. And the next segment, we're gonna focus on the mental health issue part. Okay. 好，进段广告，休息一下，马上回来。在新冠疫情和停止亚洲仇恨运动兴起之后，是不是有任何个案值得我们省思跟借鉴呢？而借此来保护自己呢？如果需要帮助的话，又应该如何寻求帮助呢？继续请到我们王明武律师来跟我们谈谈这个话题。Hello, Mr. Wong. I think the next This segment, we're gonna focus on the mental health issues. Let me make examples. We know James Lee Ramsey, who attacked the cow chain in Oakland, Chinatown. And however, he did again, he attacked a woman, as an 88 years old Asian woman in San Francisco. However, he is claiming he has a mental health issues. So what do you think about this situation?
The Ramseys of this world are never going to change. He's a racist. He hates Asians.
Yes.
Whether you punish him or because he's mentally ill, for example, and you try to help him change his ways, that's called rehabilitation, it's not going to work. Especially in the Bay Area, when you see this, they give a lot of people who make mistakes like this, they give them a second, third chance. You go outside of the Bay Area, you go to the state of Idaho or even the state of Nevada, you're going to get, this happened in Nevada, you're going to go to jail, period. It's just that California's system is that they don't hold a lot of these people accountable. They try to help them rehabilitate. That's never going to change them. The Ramseys of this world, and there's a lot of them, you go to Oakland, Chinatown, you see a lot of police vehicles presence now,
yes.
Okay? But it really doesn't help because there's so many criminal elements driving around Chinatown there. What can they do? You can't stop them. It's going to happen. If they catch them, they go to jail, they get out of jail. They have defenses. They hire attorneys or they're appointed attorneys if they can't afford one. That's the problem we have. And so that's why they're getting out of jail, because they're asserting in their defense mental illness or mental health issues. And it diminishes their intent to commit the crime. And so they get less jail time. That's got to change. They have to be more accountable.
And why the California system is different than other states?
You have to understand that California is much more progressive and liberal and politically liberal when it comes down to criminal justice, reformation or reform, or how they deal with the criminal justice system. It's much more liberal and progressive in California. It's not law and order like it is in other states. So that's why, if you want to reform California law, you have to treat these individuals differently, these criminal elements differently. They need to be held accountable. That's hard to do politically in California because there's a lot of pressure from each side, the progressive side versus the conservative side in terms of how to treat criminals in the California system. So political that nothing gets really done. It's hard to reform any type of laws in California to make those changes. The laws change depending upon the political climate. That's the problem we have in California. Other states, like I said, more conservative states, it's more black and white. Here in California, it's more gray in terms of how to met out justice in the criminal law system.
So we are in California now. So looking forward, what do you think we can do as a society to prevent such issues, these issues?
In the long term, in California, in the long term, again, you're going to have at least 2 or 3 generations before we could, get the Asian hate down to insignificance. Like right now in Florida, they have what they call anti-woke. That means they don't believe in minority history of what happened with slavery and all that stuff. In California, we need to have in our educational system a complete history of all the discrimination that occurred against Asians, for example. You need to have that taught in the schools, what happens. So you can, so a lot of these children, they come from families that, their parents hate Asians. Okay, so that's what it is. Well, we need to change that, and it's gonna have to be through the school system and education system. It's gonna take at least 1 or 2 generations before the Asian hate is reduced significantly.
Okay, the last question of today is, do you have any suggestion or advice to our senior viewers? How can they protect themselves in this environment, like Asian hate, silent hate? Yeah.
Okay. A lot of my clients don't speak any English, but they're senior Asians that don't have a lot of resources to protect themselves. And I'm going to tell them right now, do not leave your community or your house at night by yourself. During the day, be near a lot of people. Don't isolate yourself from anyone. And because if you do, you're going to get attacked and you don't even know it. Especially nowadays, because this Oakland community and San Francisco, most of the criminals are from other neighborhoods or are out of town. They're not even from your community. They're from out of town, and they come in here and they leave. They commit crimes and they leave immediately. You can never catch them. So when it comes down to violent crimes, they're trying to get something of value, trying to rob you is what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And you'll never see them again. So to avoid that, you just have to be more aware of what's going on, because the police agencies will arrive, but they're always late. It's always after the fact. They're never there at the same time when you need them. That's unfortunate.
I believe our viewers got a lot of important information from you, and thank you for your advice and insights. We hope we have another opportunity to interview again soon, okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. 很多亚裔的长者由于语言的问题面临了歧视性辱骂的时候，自己并未及时意识到，因此在遇到类似事件的时候，一定要大胆报警，并且在有可能的情况下拍照、录影留证。面对无声的仇恨和暴力，更要积极的面对跟处理。也许一次不见效果，但积少成多，积沙成塔，那些歧视、欺负华裔的那些人就会明白，我们不再是沉默的一群。看完今天的节目，相信你会更了解亚裔以及华人朋友在日常生活当中应该要如何保护自己，这也是节目要时时提醒您要关注的话题。保障自身的权益，保护自己，也保护周边的亲朋好友。感谢您收看今晚的节目，我是海翔，下回节目再见，晚安。感谢大家对仇恨边缘的关注，记得扫描2维码就可以在天下卫视 YouTube 官方频道上面重温往期节目。